It's quite middle of the day, like Wednesday. We are in Wednesday, and yeah, I thought this is the right time because Eric is here. So he's the kind of popular person in the Power Automate and AI field, and he has done quite a lot of recent talks with Power Platform Conference and also with Ignite, and is quite popular in the Power Automate area. So you can see his forum answers in the Power Automate, I believe. So he's on the top board. He's answering very actively on some of the complex problems, which is really useful for you guys as well. So go and have a official look at the Power Platform, the Power Automate forum. So I will paste the link once Erika started his session. So that would be a good start as well. So if you guys are facing any Power Automate related kind of complex problem you wanted to resolve, so Eric is the right person. So he is the key expertise in the Power Automate area. Also, the thing is, yeah, there are more things to say about Eric, but I will just start with the slide here. So right now you can see it's Auckland Power Platform user group. So this is the leadership team. You can see so Greg and Hamish has kindly accepted to host this Auckland Power Platform user group on behalf of them. So there are two groups as you are aware, like Auckland has a Dynamics 365 Power Platform user group as well as this Auckland Power Platform user group specifically focusing on Power Platform and all the Power five products. So that's the thing. And let me move on to the next slide. Yeah, as I mentioned, like the area of focus is mainly about all the Power Platform products, all the five products, including the Power Pages, as well as AI Builder, Dataverse, and Data Connectors. So Eric, I believe last year Eric has done the custom connector session with the New Zealand BA Summit, which was also really cool. So it is also available. I think Rami has hosted that in the YouTube recording. I will share that link as well. Yeah, so that's the thing. And also just this is the housekeeping. So I request everyone to go on mute and unmute like whenever is necessary, like just a basic ethics to follow. And also this slide deck will be shared, and as like a disclaimer, I would say this will be recorded, and if anyone is not interested, please feel free to leave or please let me know. Like this is because we are capturing all this thing, and it will be hosted on the link which is on the slide which you are seeing. So this is the official Microsoft approved Auckland Power Platform user group link, which you can actually join for the future sessions as well. And what we do, so we actually do monthly meetups. We are planning to do frequent meetups like every 15 days, but from next year onwards, we got the approved building in Auckland. So we will be hosting in person as well as hybrid event like online uh, starting next year. As well as the purpose of the events is like upskilling yourself, also like get some fun with the technology like Eric and like Lynn and so many other people expertise in this area. So they share their knowledge. So it's a good opportunity for you guys to actually learn and upskill yourself. So it's one of the key thing. So this is the agenda, and the show is actually Eric Cheng. So again, introducing Eric Cheng is a digital architect. He's based in Sydney, currently working for Komatsu, Australia. So with that, I will hand over to Eric. Um, Eric, over to you. Thank you.
Right. So I'll just share my screen. So can you see that over Teams?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you for the kind introductions, and also hello and welcome to everyone who's joining us for today's session. As we mentioned, my name's Eric Cheng. I'm a digital solutions architect with Komatsu Australia. I've been architecting and developing solutions for a while now, and yeah, I spent a lot of time across Office 365 business applications and Azure. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email if you have any questions about today's session or about anything Power Platform in general. And you can also find me on the Power community forum, where I enjoy helping the community learn more about the Power Platform. So before we get into the topic, just a bit of an agenda of what we'll cover. it was a bit hard trying to come up with a structure because, Power Automate and AI Builder is quite broad. And I did want to actually go through a fair few things. So we'll do a very high level overview of Power Automate, cloud and desktop flows, maybe touch on the licensing, do the same thing for AI Builder, what the capabilities are, the benefits of it, and then again, bit on the licensing, and then pretty much we'll go straight into demos. We've got 3 demos that we'll build mostly from scratch. The first is the feedback sentiment workflow. So, if you're in the service industry, getting customer feedback is something that's very common. So how do you use AI Builder to get the sentiment of what your customers are providing? And how do you escalate that within Power Automate as a workflow, for example? In demo 2, we'll look at unstructured data extraction. So this is a relatively new feature from AI Builder. Rather than having structured data like a CSV file in a tabular format, if you look at contracts and lease agreements, things like that, they're pretty much words or walls of text. So how do you extract information from those? And here we'll look at an example of a lease agreement where we'll receive a lease agreement from our emails, and then we'll upload those lease agreements into SharePoint, and we'll use AI Builder to extract key information from these agreements, such as the names of people, the rent, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, etc., the address, and we'll tag that document as metadata within SharePoint. And then the last demo is intelligent invoice processing. So very common scenario. Every organization will most likely receive invoices and they'll need to pay these invoices. So we'll look at how we can use AI Builder again to extract information from these invoices, key value pairs, information from tabular line items, and then we'll also look at Power Automate Desktop to automate the processing of these invoices into a dummy sort of accounting system that I've made up. So firstly, what is Power Automate? For those that may not be aware, Power Automate is sort of Microsoft or one of Microsoft's iPaaS platform. So it is a low code to no code integration automation workflow platform that allows you to build solutions across different systems and applications. So Power Automate is part of the Power Platform family, and using Power Automate, you can build 2 types of solutions: cloud flows and desktop flows. So when we talk about cloud flows, these are, I guess, what a lot of users, or what most makers will predominantly build. They're really API-led integrations, which is point-to-point from system an application to another system and application. They're scheduled. They can be instantaneous, which means you can trigger them manually from either the maker environment or from a mobile app. And they also can be automated, which means there's a trigger. So you can trigger a cloud flow to run when you receive an email, when a SharePoint document is uploaded into SharePoint, when a list item or when an item is created in Dataverse, as an example. There's hundreds of connectors available, and these connectors basically are wrappers around all these APIs. So as you, as a maker, don't need to really understand APIs and how they work, all the security behind them. These connectors abstract all that complexity away, and all you have to do really is just drag and drop these connectors, determine what action you want to use, pass the inputs, and manage the outputs. You can also extend Power Automate Cloud Flows by creating custom connectors as well. So you can create your own custom wrappers or your own APIs for systems which you may be hosting internally within your organization. So the next type of flow are desktop flows. So you may have heard of RPA before, and desktop flows are basically Microsoft's RPA equivalent. Using RPA, you can build software type of processes or flows, robots that can emulate people or human-computer interaction. So, for example, you can create a desktop flow to click a mouse button, type in a text box, navigate across a web page, extract information from a web page. The way I like to put it is, if you can document a process and hand it off to someone else, and they can repeat that process step for step and get to the same output, it's usually a good indicator of whether that process can be automatable or not. Now, one of the key questions I kept asking getting asked is, what's the difference between cloud flows and desktop flows? And really, desktop flows uses that UI automation. So in this day and age, there's still a lot of legacy systems. There's still a lot of applications without APIs, AS400 mainframe systems, external systems, which you may not have access to. So desktop flows are really suited for those types of scenarios. If there are connectors, if there are APIs, by all means, check out cloud flows. But there's both options available, which makes really Power Automate a really powerful automation and integration tool. There are two types of desktop flows that you can build, attended and unattended. I'm not going to get into too much. They're pretty much the same type of flows. The key difference is how you run it and where you run it. So attended flows require a user to be logged in. So for example, on your laptop, you can trigger the desktop flow to run and it will run on your laptop. If you want to run a desktop flow on a server, for example, throughout the day and night where it's not possible to have someone logged in, attended flows are what you can also use as well. The other difference is really licensing. In terms of licensing, look, there's probably a lot to go through in terms of demos, which is more interesting. There are a lot of different plans available for both cloud flows and desktop flows. Microsoft does a relatively good job at simplifying that on their website. So check it out. Again, if there's any questions, feel free to ask me on the Q&A. Then that brings us to AI Builder. So AI Builder is Microsoft's, I guess, low code, no code AI tool. And it's a shared capacity that is available within the Power Platform. And when I say shared, it means that you can leverage AI Builder and infuse AI across your Power Apps, across Power BI, across your flows in Power Automate, etc. So what AI Builder is, it's an abstraction of Azure AI. So Azure AI is the pro dev, the data scientist sort of layer or the platform within Azure. And there's a lot of these services which are available, such as Forms Recognizer, which allows you to extract, again, key value pairs, tabular information. There's cognitive services that allows you to perform things like text translation, image recognition, things like that. But it does require users to go into Azure, understand how APIs work, and potentially code. So what Microsoft has done is really embed these experiences within the Power Platform through a no-code experience. So through wizards, through the Maker environment, through the Maker portals, citizen developers no longer need to go outside of the Power Platform to use these AI capabilities. So why is this useful? Well, here are some challenges facing AI, right? According to Gartner in a survey in 2022, yes, 97% of executives plan on investing heavily in AI. However, if we look at the next two stats, it's quite alarming because 54% of projects fail to make it past a pilot into production. And also 85% of AI projects fail either in terms of living up to expectations or actually delivering. So without an actual productionized use case, right, AI really isn't very useful to anyone. And then the last stat is also quite alarming. 41% of organizations have reported AI privacy breaches. So, with AI also comes the infrastructure, the governance, the ethics around it. So how do you actually secure all of that? And that's really where the benefit of AI Builder comes in, right? It's low code. It is a tool that your citizen developers, your makers across your business can leverage to start infusing AI into their solutions. And what that means is you can actually build things a lot quicker. We'll look at in the demos, out of the box models that are available that you can quickly use and get started within your apps and your flows. For anything more specific to your organizational business cases, you can create custom models. You can also bring your own models from Azure AI or Azure Machine Learning and import them into AI Builder as well. So you can go from out of the box all the way to fully customizable depending on your requirements. And with AI Builder, it comes with a whole security and management layer. So administrators can specify who in your organization can use AI Builder, what models they have access to, and what they can do with it. So all of that is offered as a SaaS solution as well. So organizations don't need to maintain, administer, and also secure any infrastructure to get started with AI Builder. So what can we do with AI Builder? Well, AI Builder works with, I guess, 4 key data types, I guess. Documents, which includes, reading anything from letters, invoices, receipts, passports, text. It could be from text from an email, text in a file or a document, images, and also structured data. So it can actually perform things like predictions based on structured data from Dataverse, as an example. Is this candidate a good candidate for a membership? Is this transaction fraudulent? Things like these you can also do using AI Builder. And here are some use cases, which I'll leave here for you to have a look at. And in terms of licensing, AI Builder is an add-on to PowerApps, Power Automate, and D365. You can start off with a trial, and that's a great way to get started. There's also the standard pricing of $500 per unit. You can also get some credits if you have unattended RPA. And again, a lot of this information is available on the website, so do go and check it out if you're really interested. And then that brings us really into the demos. So the first demo that I'm going to build is a sentiment analysis workflow. So I'm in my Power Automate cloud portal here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a Cloudflow that will take an input from a Microsoft form that I will show you. And this is a pretty generic Microsoft form. And I can enter in bits of information here. And at the bottom, I can provide feedback about the quality of the service. And what I want to do is to be able to escalate, any negative feedback back to a point of escalation. Could be a manager, could be someone who looks after customer support. So on the left-hand side, you'll notice there's an AI Builder heading over here. And what you can do is you can go to Explore or Models. And models will show you any models that you've already built or any models which have been shared with you. So you can see here, I don't actually have any models, but I do actually have 2 models which I've built earlier and shared with me because who knows how demos usually go. So if I go to Explore, you can see when it loads, there are a lot of out-of-the-box models, pre-built models, pre-trained models that you can use. Extracting information from invoices, from receipts. If we look at here, there's one which will detect positive, negative, or neutral sentiment in data or in text. And you can specify your language, and you can also type something to see how it works. So I'm going to click on random sample. My device stopped working after 2 months. I'm going to click on analyze, and it's probably going to give me a negative one, 96%, right? So based on this sentiment, right, I want to be able to trigger that workflow task to someone. So there's a number of ways to get started, and Microsoft has made it really easy. You can click on using the flow or using the app. And if I click on using the flow, it will take you to a template which you can then get started. It'll give you sort of the boilerplate example. Not sure what's not working there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my flows and I'm going to build one from scratch because the examples that are there are not really the ones I really want anyways. So I'm going to go to automated Cloudflow and I'm going to call this feedback sentiment workflow. And the trigger that I want for my flow is when a form response is submitted. And it could be really anything, right? It could be an email, it could be anything that you're exposing to your customers to get feedback. So I'm going to go and create. And it's going to sign in. Should have done this beforehand. And okay, it's going to sign in. So I'm going to pick my form, and it's going to be the car servicing feedback form. Okay. And what I'm going to do is to get the responses of that particular response, get the answers. So I'm going to go look for forms, and I'm going to go get response details. I'm going to pass it the name again, car servicing feedback, and I'm just going to get the response ID, which is the one that's going to be passed in from here, which will trigger the flow. So next, I'm going to call on AI Builder. So if you look at AI Builder, there's a number of actions which are available within the connector. You can classify text, you can detect languages, you can extract information, and we'll use some of these in our later demos. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to analyze positive or negative sentiment. I'm going to select English, okay? And the text will be the last question in my form, okay? And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a condition. And if the overall text sentiment is negative, I'm going to trigger an approval workflow. Now, you can do a lot of things. You can use the confidence score. You can do specific sentences and get quite granular. Do check out the connector, the PowerPlatform connector for AI Builder to look at, potentially what you can do with it. But for us in our demo, this sort of condition is fine. We're going to start a approval. Again, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to go negative feedback received, and it's going to assign it to myself. Cool. And I can do things like, for example, put in the actual response in here so that the person can know. Ultimately, you can upload this into Dataverse. If you've got customer voice, you can link it from there as well. But for us, this should get us what we need to do. So we've now saved our flow. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go and submit a response. Someone else's name, John Smith. Email is email@email.com. And the date of the service, today. Type of the service, 1 year. The mechanic was rude, and oil is everywhere. So hopefully this should give us a pretty negative sentiment and trigger off that approval task. So if we go back to our flow, we can see we've got the flow that is triggered, and you can see it's actually very quickly performed the analysis. It's a 90%, 99% negative. And what it's going to do is obviously it's going to go and trigger an approval task back to myself, which I can then go in and review. So if I go to my Microsoft Teams, and have a look over here, I should see my negative feedback received, 23rd of November. If I click into it, I can see the actual response that was submitted. And again, I can now follow up back with that customer and make sure that they're looked after in terms of that negative feedback. So that's the first scenario. So let's look at something a little bit more interesting. So the second scenario that I want to look at is a lease agreement type of analysis. So what I want to do is to be able to receive these typical lease agreements from an email. So you can see I've downloaded this one from the internet, and I've created some copies. I want to be able to extract information like the landlord, the tenants, the number of bathrooms, bedrooms, car spaces, the rent, and things like the agreement date. And I want to then be able to populate the columns relating to that particular lease agreement. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Explore again, and we're going to go and actually create a custom model, because none of the models which are available out of the box would allow us to actually extract all that information or that specific information. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and extract custom information from documents. We're going to, it'll give you a bit of an introduction. We're going to go to Get Started. And from here, we will be able to specify whether our document is structured or unstructured. So our document is sort of unstructured, it's all over the place. If for invoices, which we'll look at later, if hopefully we have time, will be structured, but for us, it's unstructured. So what we're going to do is we need to first specify what information we want to extract from the lease agreement. So things like the landlord name would be one of them. Another one might be tenant. I'm just going to select a few. Is apartment is one of them, because there's a checkbox, and is house. Let's just do that, because the more you specify, obviously, the more you actually have to tag your documents. So we're going to go to next, and we need to then upload a sample of documents, which we'll train our custom model with. So what we're going to do is click on New Collection. We can give this a name, and we'll call this Lease Agreements. And we're going to click on plus and upload these documents. And there's a number of places you can upload them from, SharePoint, feedback loop, which I'll talk about a little bit later, blob storage, but I'm just going to upload it from my device. So I've got sample lease agreements here. I'm going to select 5. 5 is the minimum you need to upload to train. You can obviously do more, and it's always good to do more because even with invoices, you're going to get variations. Some of them might be on 1 page, on 2 pages, etc. So it's always good to do more. But for us, 5 is enough. So we're going to go to next, and you can see here you'll have your 5 lease agreements, and they'll show you a preview here. And this is where you actually tag your documents. And tagging your documents, as you'll see, is where you actually tell AI Builder, this is an example of the landlord name. This is an example of the tenant name. This is an example of the bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, etc. And over the course of these training documents, over these 5 documents, AI Builder will then get trained over it and hopefully become very accurate. So as an example, you can see when I hover over text, it's gonna detect that there's text. I can also then just drag a little text box over it, and I'm going to say that this is the landlord. You can see it's ticked. I can then drag over this, and I'm going to select this is the tenant. If you want to do the number of bedrooms, you'll do it here as well. You can also do checkboxes, and I've kind of stuffed it up because I forgot to create checkboxes as an actual checkbox. So let's go back and fix it up. So you can see actually there's a checkbox, is apartment, and is house. And I'm just going to do one more, agreement date. Okay. So again, you can see here, I can now do agreement date and drag it over. If you've got things over 2 lines, you can actually go and hold control and continue dragging as well. So that will allow you to tag things over 2 lines, agreement date. And if I hover over the checkbox, I can do is apartment and is house. And basically, if it's checked, it will return true. If it's unchecked, it will return false. So once you've tagged your first document, you pretty much do the same thing, rinse and repeat for all your other training documents. So here you've got agreement date, landlord, tenant, I'm just going to do one more, and then I'll show you what we're going to do next. We're going to do his apartment, his house, and that's it. So now, once you've gone through your 5 documents, you'll go and you'll have an option to train your model, which is basically a button push. And it will then go off and start training your model. Now, the reason why I didn't do that is depending on your model, it does take a little while. You know, it can take 5 to 10 minutes sometimes. So rather than sit here and wait 5 to 10 minutes, I showed you before, I've actually shared myself the same model that I built earlier, and I'll be using those models instead. So if I go to AI Builder and go to models, and go to share with me, here's one I prepared earlier. So if I click into it, you can see there's a lot more fields that I've tagged once it loads. You can see landlord, tenant, agreement date, agreement start date, a whole bunch, right? And once you've trained your model, you can see you can actually do a quick test and upload a particular file. So let's quickly do that. Going to analyze it. And it's going to detect all the fields that we specified in the model. Okay. So you can see it's actually detected all the fields that I tagged, right? If I zoom in here, okay? So let's make use of this model. So again, if you want to use the model, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my flows, and I'm going to build a new automated flow. And here I'm going to go and call this lease agreement upload. And I'm going to do it so that when an email is received. So I'm going to look for Outlook. When a new email arrives, I'm going to sign in. I just need to wait for my code. Believe it or not, I actually forgot my password. So I've been doing this for a few weeks now. I actually should be stop being lazy and actually reset my password. Don't be like me. So we're going to sign in. That's cool. And that's fine. We'll just leave it as the inbox. We're going to include the attachments, and we'll just say only trigger this for emails with attachments. You can also specify a few more filters if you want. So we're going to go back into AI Builder again, and we're going to use the extract information from documents. Okay, and with this, you're able to specify the models. So I'm going to use the model that I shared with myself that I prepared earlier. With the form type, it's going to be a PDF document, and the content or the actual file will be the actual attachment that it's going to extract from the email. And it's going to loop through if you've got multiple attachments as well. Okay. So what we're going to then do is we're going to go to SharePoint, and we're going to create a file, which will then upload that document. And Auckland. And we're just going to leave this as the attachment name, the attachment content. And this will create the file. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go up update file properties to actually populate those additional columns with data that are returned from AI Builder. So we're going to go to SharePoint. We're going to go update file properties. And it is lease agreements. Got to put that in. And here we're going to specify the ID, which is going to be returned from when we upload the file. And here we're just going to go and look for all the values. So landlord value, tenant value, agreement date, value. So I'm not going to do all of them because it might take a bit of time. So I'll just do 2 more. Bedrooms value, so number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and let's just do the last one, which is address. Property address value. Okay. So we're going to save that. That's cool. And I'm going to open up my inbox and I'm going to send myself an email.
Hey, Eric, just a quick question. So
Yep.
what is the actual use of the checkbox? I couldn't quite understand.
Oh,
While
the
you were tagging.
checkbox. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me send myself the email first because
Yeah.
it does take sometimes a little while to trigger the flow. And I'm just going to call this lease. Okay. And I'm just going to hit send. Okay. So whilst that's sending and we're waiting for that. So if I go back to the lease agreement, right? You can see I can actually, or the person filling it in the form can actually check the checkboxes, right? And I can actually say, you know, I can create a checkbox field and say, has apartment been checked, true or false, yes or no? Has house been checked, yes or no? So this is the, I think this was recently added in, but it's really useful for, I guess, these types of forms and scenarios.
Okay. So the table is also a similar feature, is it?
Yes, yes. And we'll look at tables in the next demo in invoices. Yeah.
Great, great. Thank you.
Cool. So hopefully it does run soon. Yeah, with Outlook, sometimes it does take a while, unfortunately. Okay. So my inbox just came, the email just arrived in my inbox just then. So hopefully it will trigger soon. If not, that's cool. We'll go on to the next demo and then we'll come back to it. Okay, there we go. So if we open up the flow, you can see the email obviously got triggered. Nothing interesting there. And what it's going to do is it's going to loop through each of the attachments, depending on how many you have. It's going to send it to AI Builder, upload the attachment, and populate this lease agreement with another document. Okay. So again, it can take a little while because we are extracting a fair few fields from our documents. So wait for that to finish. Okay, that's fine. That's completed. There we go. We've got a new document. So this one, I have no idea. A few seconds ago, the top one. So you can see we've uploaded the lease agreement. We've also populated some data about the landlord, the tenant, the agreement date, property, the address, etc. We didn't have these because we didn't populate those fields in our connector. But you can see this is our second example of how you can actually use AI Builder to extract unstructured information from unstructured documents. So the last example is something that is quite common, and it's invoice processing. So I've created some dummy invoices here, again, using some templates that I found on the internet. and everyone's favorite company, Contonso Limited. And you can see, we've got some header information. We've got a table here of the line items, some dollar figures, tax, and so forth. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a flow that will take these documents and then read the information from these invoices and then upload it into my state-of-the-art accounting system that I have here. So the accounting system is going to basically require me to enter the invoice number, the invoice date, the tax, and the dollar figure. Not very fancy at all. But there's no APIs. So how do we do this? We're going to use Power Automate Desktop because it allows us to actually emulate me manually clicking into each of these fields and typing in that information, which surprisingly is still very common. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to Power Automate. I'm going to go to models, and I'll show you, similar to before, how you can get started to extract that information from the invoices. And obviously, I've created a model beforehand, which will then save us from having to train. So there is an actual pre-built model here from invoices, and what I would suggest is test it out first. But for me, I want to actually extract some specific information. There's a custom business requirement. In description, you can see I've got bolts and I've got the part number. I want to be able to actually extract these two values separately and be able to actually pull and extract part name and part number from this single column. So in that case, yes, invoices, the pre-built connector model probably won't work. I'm going to go and extract or create a custom model just like before to do this. Now, if you don't have this requirement, by all means, like I said, give the invoice one a go, the pre-built one, because it'll save you a bit of time. But again, I'm just going to go and create the custom one because it's a little bit more exciting as well. So here, I'm going to select structured because you can see here, structured means that, across your different invoices, they're all relatively going to be the same, okay? Whereas with unstructured, they're going to be different. I'll talk about scenarios where you may have different vendors with different templates and how you can structure those as well. So we're going to select structured, and we're going to go and add a few fields in here as well. So we're going to do invoice number. We're going to go and go to invoice date and tax total. And for the line items in the table, I'm going to select table, right? And in table, I'm going to call this lines, and I'm going to rename this to description. I'm going to add another one for part number, right? I'm going to add another one for quantity. I'm going to add another one for rate and amount. Again, this will be used to extract this here, okay? So once I've done that, I'm going to click on done, and I'm going to go to next. And again, I need to upload a sample of documents. So I'm going to go and create a new collection, and I'm going to call this invoices. So what you can do if you've got different vendors and a helicopter is just flying past really close, what you can do if you've got multiple invoices is to create different collections for each of those invoices or each of these vendors, because you don't really want to have to create a new model and maintain those models for each vendor, right? So you can call this, for example, supplier 1. You might have a new collection, supplier 2, and then they would have different templates of models that you're going to be training, okay? But for us, we don't have that issue. It's only just going to be one supplier. So we're going to go and upload it from my desktop again. Again, we've got 5. We're going to go and upload them and tag it. So the only thing I want to show you, or the only thing that's really different in this example, is that tab is tagging the tabular information. right? So you get the preview and each of your sample documents on the right-hand side. And again, similar to before, invoice number, total, tax. And what you can do here is you can actually drag the entire table and specify lines. And when you've done lines, you can see you then need to go and specify, your columns and rows. Okay, so what you can do is click on the row and then click on individual columns to tag it. What I like to do, because I've got that specific requirement, is go to advanced tagging. And you can see I've got my table on the right-hand side here. And what I can do here is I can actually say this is motor, this is the part number, this is the quantity, this is the rate, and this is the amount. And then done. So I'm going to do the next one. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to select lines. And same thing, I'm going to go to advanced, description, part number, quantity, rate, amount, description, part number, quantity, rate. And we're going to do this for each of those remaining templates. And once you've tagged it, same thing, we're going to train our document and it's going to basically be a button that you just push and it will then become available within your Power Automate environment. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go back to my home screen and show you the example that I've built earlier. So we're going to go to models and again, I've got another model that I've shared with myself. And you can see here, these are the fields that I've tagged to extract. So pretty much exactly the same as the example that I've shown you earlier. So what I'm going to do here is several things. I'm going to go and create a new instant Cloudflow. I'm going to trigger this manually. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to specify a file input. So I'm going to trigger this flow manually, pass in a file. And what I'm going to do is I need to upload it to this, right? Now, there actually isn't any forms connector that allows me to upload or pass in information. And there also isn't any APIs available. So this brings us to Power Automate Desktop. So I'm not going to go through how to install Power Automate Desktop, okay? It's actually a very simple installer. You go next, 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 next. But what we can do once you've installed the installer is to be able to go and create your Power Automate Desktop flow. So we're going to call this upload to forms, okay? So when you go and create a flow, you get a designer, which is similar to this. And on the left-hand side, when it loads, you'll have all your actions available. So there's, if I look for SQL, there's actions here relating to SQL databases. I can connect to a SQL database. I can run a query. If I look for Excel, there's different actions for me to interact with Excel. So there's a lot of different actions available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, that's okay. I'm going to get the lease agreement. I'm going to then open up a browser, open up forms, and then I'm going to fill in the information. So if I look for Chrome, I'm going to go and use the launch new Chrome action. And here I need to specify the URL for that I want to navigate to. So I'm just going to open up this. And you can also specify a few additional parameters, such as do you want to maximize, etc. We're just going to leave it as the default. So I'm just going to leave everything as standard, and I'm just going to hit run. And what it should do is it should open up another Chrome window and open up my form. And that's it. Really, you've created your first RPA process, right? But it's not very useful, but it's a working process. So the next thing we want to do is to be able to enter the information returned from AI Builder into each of these fields. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go back to my desktop flow, my cloud flow. I'm going to go to AI Builder. I'm going to look for extract, and I'm going to extract information from documents because we're using that custom model that we trained earlier. So I'm going to select my model. I'm going to select the image type. It's an image. I didn't have time to convert it to a PDF, and it's going to be file content. I'm just going to make sure that it's a PNG type. There we go. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go and SharePoint. And I'm going to go and create a list item in a SharePoint list. So, I'm using SharePoint. You could be using Dataverse. You could be using SQL. And if I go to my invoices custom list here, this is what it should look like. Okay. So I'm going to delete everything here. And I'm going to pass in the invoice number value, date value, description value, part number value. You can see it's actually moved it into a loop because obviously you're going to have in that table multiple rows within that table. So it's just going to create a new row within a new list item for each row. So we're going to do part number, value, rate, quantity, amount, tax, and the total value. And for process, we're going to default to no. So that's pretty much it. So we're going to kick this off. And whilst it's running, we're going to go back to our desktop flow. So if I go to run, I'm going to browse to my file. Let's do, doesn't really matter. Let's do invoice 2. And that's done. So it's going to run, and in a little bit, it's going to upload it. It's just going to take a little while to process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go and invoke an API to get the information from this list. So I've actually pre-built that flow API. So it's just a flow connector, a flow using a SharePoint connector to get list items. So I want to go invoke web service. And I'm doing this because it's the easiest way possible. Now you can see I'm actually getting an error because of the syntax. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and create a variable, and I'm just going to this URL, and that's the default value URL, and that's fine. So I'm just going to go and call this again. So I'll explain it in a bit more detail once I finish a little bit more. So I'm going to pass in the URL and to get it's JSON, and we're going to save, and let's test it out and see what actually happens. So I'm going to display a message box with the response of my web service call. We're going to hit save, and we're going to run. Okay, so in SharePoint, my list items have now been added. You can see I've got my description, part number, separated into different columns and all the other values, okay? So the next thing I'm trying to do is to actually get that information, but I'm not getting anything. So I'm going to very quickly do one thing. And an HTTP request is received. SharePoint. Get items. Auckland. List name is invoices. So this is just going to get all the list items from that SharePoint list, and it's going to send a response back with the value. That's it. It's just complaining that, you know, you should put a filter in because obviously it can get quite big. That's okay. I only have 2 items in there. I'm going to come back in here, save, and I'm going to run it again. So hopefully it should return the list of items in there in JSON. Okay, yeah, it's not good. Oh, post and get. That's okay. That's created as a post as opposed to a get. Let's try this again. So what should happen now is I should have a response of my list items. Okay, there we go. So this is a whole bunch of response of the list items from that's returned from my SharePoint list. So what I'm going to then do is stop this, and I'm going to pass that JSON right into a custom object, and then I can then go and use a loop and loop through each of the elements within that JSON. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go use a convert JSON to custom object. The JSON is the response from my invoke web service. It's going to create an output variable, which I'll just leave it as the default. You can go and rename it if you want. And what I'm going to do next is use a loop. So I'm going to use for each, and it's going to loop for each child object within my custom object. It's going to return the current item. And let's move my message box in here. And I'm going to go current item. You can use and pass in the index 0, 1, 2, 3, or you can actually pass in the name of the of the heading. So for example, here I have it as invoice date as an example. So let's just hit save and run, and it should actually go into my SharePoint list, call the API flow that I've created, loop through each of the responses, the objects in the response, display the invoice date of that particular list item, which is done here, and it's going to go and then do the next one. Good. So the next thing I need to do is I can now access my SharePoint properties, is to actually move this up a bit and pass in the values into these text boxes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and search for web, and you can see in the action groups, there's a web form filling, populate text box on web page, and it's going to take the browser instance that is returned when I first launched the browser. And I need to then tell my flow which text box I actually want to go and populate, because there's a few in there. I'm going to click on Add UI Element, and you can see if I hover over my web page, it's going to detect the HTML elements, and I'm going to pass in invoice number. So I'm going to hit Control and click on it, and you can see it will create an XPath, which is the behind the scenes reference to that particular element. And I'm going to pass in the title, because title is the actual invoice number. Okay, so we're going to hit save, and we're pretty much going to repeat that for a few more fields. So we're going to go populate. We need to then go and add a new element, and this time we're going to do invoice date. And again, invoice date, I'm just going to paste that in here, is the current item and the column name, and hit save. We'll just do one more. Actually, there's not that many fields anyways. Add UI element, tax. Paste that in here. And then the last one is the total. So ideally, in real life, you'll rename these XPaths to something a little bit more meaningful, but we are probably quite short on time, so we're just going to finish up very quickly and go to total. And then the last one is I need to click on the button to submit, right? So if I go into here, there's a submit button at the bottom. I'm going to go and say press button on web page. I'm going to drag that here. So similar thing, I need to go and tell my desktop flow which button I need to click. And then that's it. There's a few more properties as well, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do, because I can preempt what it's going to happen, just give me 1 second, is when you hit submit, you get this, right? And to submit the next response, you need to click this to go back to the form. So I'm just going to go and also click on that as well, because we do have 2 list items and it's going to submit the form twice. I'm going to hit save. Cool. That's it. So I'm going to close all my Chrome windows. And I'm going to hit on run. Opening a form, it's going to go and populate the invoice number, invoice date, then do the rest. I'll have a look at what it is. Okay. So half of it worked. We'll troubleshoot what the issue is with the rest of the here we go. With the rest of the flow. I think that's the issue, but we'll try it again. So there's also a few things you can do to increase the performance of it, because every time it actually goes and types in something, it checks if that field's there. But again, we can leave it. Obviously, it doesn't want to play ball, but we've got most of the demo working, so that's a good start. Okay, so look, that's pretty much it for the demos. I do have one last slide. And that's basically on new features of AI Builder. So from the Power Platform conference and from Ignite, there's a few announcements coming out of AI Builder. So unstructured document processing is now in GA. So we saw that earlier with the lease agreements. Multi-page tables and multi-line fields are now in preview or GA, don't quote me. And basically what that means is if you've got an invoice and you've got a table and they're on multiple pages, previously it was a bit of a challenge, but now you can actually continue tagging and process multi-tables across multiple pages. You can also enable co-editing of AI models with different people. And there's also feedback loops. Feedback loops is quite good. I'm not sure if you recall earlier, but when you went and trained your model, when you had to upload files into a collection, there was a feedback loop option. So basically, feedback loop allows you to go through your day-to-day processing of documents, invoices, but you can specify a threshold of confidence score. So if it's under 80% or under 70%, I want to actually take that document, park it, and then come back into my models and retrain it to improve or continuously improve that model over time. So that's feedback loop. That's in preview. Also, again, check it out if you do have time. So that's pretty much it for my presentation today. Hope you found it interesting and informative. And yeah, any questions?
Yeah, obviously the Power Automate desktop was really useful, Eric. So it was, I think it's a good productivity thing, which is eventually required for all the enterprise companies. So I will give it a try definitely. And yeah, I put thank you guys. I think I have shared all Eric related details, so LinkedIn and then Power Platform community details, as well as he's active on different things. So I have shared all the links already. So feel free to follow him, follow Eric, and also connect with him directly. And thank you so much, everyone. It's really a wonderful session, Eric. Thank you so much for accepting the invite as well. So it's really useful. I believe I think it is useful for everyone. I will post the recording shortly, I think by tonight in the YouTube channel which we have. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.